A hot night, explosions in Sochi, the Ilsky oil refinery under attack. The Ukrainian armed forces advanced on Crimea, an Iskander base was destroyed. A helicopter was destroyed in the Leningrad region, and the infrastructure of the Baltic Fleet was attacked. A squadron of NATO pilots flying F-16s is defending Ukrainian skies. There is panic in the Kremlin. Ukraine's counteroffensive continues. A sensational statement from Syrskyi. In 1 week, the Ukrainian armed forces have liberated more territory than Russia occupied in a month. Near St. Petersburg, a military commandant's office was blown up with many casualties. Caught on a hidden camera, Orbán's main rival in the elections is embroiled in a sex scandal. Revenge for Kyiv. All of Bryansk is without power and freezing. Trump issues an ultimatum to Zelensky before negotiations. Kyiv responds harshly. Japan has entered the war on Ukraine's side. They are demanding that Putin hand over the Kuril Islands. Russia is deploying its navy to defend Tenyevoy. Patrushev makes loud threats. Thousands of North Korean soldiers are at the border with Ukraine. Which city will the Korean army attack? My name is Katerina Nesterenko, and right now, here are the top stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. The empire is not up to it. Another night of chaos. Ukrainian drones visited Krasnodar Krai uninvited, but right on schedule. Explosions in Sochi, everything as usual. Hot, loud, and with fireworks. The Ilsky oil refinery came under attack once again. After a precise greeting, a massive fire broke out. The flames could be seen from afar. But it wasn't just Kuban that was burning. Reportedly, the Metafrax chemical plant in the city of Gubaka, Perm Krai, also came under attack.
Metafrax Chemicals is one of the largest methanol producers in Russia and Europe. The plant produces methanol, urotropine, urea, and penterythritol, chemical components used in the manufacture of explosives and other military materials.
There was also anxiety in Tatarstan. Explosions were heard in Nizhnekamsk and Kazan. The night there was also far from calm. Sirens wailed in Leningrad Oblast as well. A partial blackout was recorded in Vyborg, and as noted by Exirenova Plus, one of the Baltic Fleet's infrastructure points is located in this very city. Coincidence? Unlikely. But that's not all. Special Operations Forces reported successful actions in the occupied territory. In the village of Pasechnoye in Crimea, a storage site for the Iskander missile system was destroyed. In addition, a Russian Ka-27 helicopter was destroyed in occupied Crimea, and in the village of Vysokoye, in the temporarily occupied part of Zaporizhzhia region, the Rubicon piloting station was hit. In my opinion, the picture is so vivid that further commentary is unnecessary. If you agree, give this video a like. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such sensible viewers. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments, and in the meantime, we continue. Next comes the most interesting part. Explosions at the military commandant's office near St. Petersburg. It is reported that 3 people have died, but there may still be others trapped under the rubble. On February 17th, a powerful explosion occurred in the building of the military police on the grounds of a military unit in the Leningrad region. The 2nd and 3rd floors collapsed. There is still a risk of further destruction. The publication Astra writes that this may involve the 56th Guards District Training Center. The governor of the region, Alexander Drozdenko, confirmed that the Ministry of Emergency Situations, rescuers, and law enforcement officers are working at the scene. The cause of the explosion is unknown. There is no official statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense at this time. And now, some good news from the front. In 5 days, the Ukrainian armed forces have liberated more than 200 square kilometers of territory. According to The Guardian and AFP, this is the largest and fastest liberation since the counteroffensive in June 2023. The Institute for the Study of War confirms these successes. From the 11th to the 15th, the Ukrainian armed forces drove the occupiers out of 201 square kilometers. As AFP notes, Ukrainian forces were able to take advantage of problems the Russians had with their Starlink terminals. Ukraine's defense forces have not yet commented on this information. Meanwhile, Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi reports that the Ukrainian armed forces are conducting assault operations in the Oleksandrivka direction, as well as in the areas of Huliaipol in the Zaporizhzhia region.
The enemy does not abandon its intentions to break through our defensive lines. They carry out constant attacks, including with the use of weapons and military equipment, but without significant success. The soldiers of the defense forces are holding certain lines and positions, thwarting the enemy's intentions and inflicting significant losses on them, both in manpower and equipment. At the same time, our units are conducting effective counterattacks and assault operations, efficiently employing drone systems, artillery, and electronic warfare tools.
However, the situation at the front remains difficult, especially in the Pokrovsk direction. According to deep state analysts, the defense of Mirnohrad is nearing its end, and the city is gradually being captured by the enemy. The Operational Command East also reports constant attempts by the enemy to infiltrate the city. Recently, the Russian army tried to break through with armored vehicles, deeper into Mirnohrad.
Thanks to the coordinated actions of aerial reconnaissance and strike units, the enemy is, in most cases, detected and neutralized in advance. In particular, attempts to break through into the city with armored vehicles were detected in a timely manner. The enemy's equipment was destroyed.
The activity of the enemy is also confirmed by the soldiers on the ground. According to Bakhmut Demon, there are currently very heavy battles taking place near Mirnohrad and Kostiantynivka. Enemy forces are constantly trying to advance, and significant resources are being spent to hold back these attacks. At the same time, Ukrainian troops continue to hunt the occupiers in the Mirnohrad area. The corresponding video is being published by the 79th Separate and 10th Assault Brigades. And one more important point. In Russia, reports of the complete capture of Mirnohrad have been circulating since December. However, one of Russia's largest propaganda outlets, RIA Novosti, recently annulled a publication in which the head of the Russian General Staff, Gerasimov, and Defense Minister Belousov reported the capture of the city. This happened at the request of the Russian Ministry of Defense. As for me, I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine. If you can't do so financially, write them words of support in the comments. I know they're watching us. If this is confirmed, it will be one of the biggest military scoops of recent months. It seems that the Ukrainian sky is now protected not only by our pilots. According to the reputable French publication Intelligence Online, a separate international squadron flying F-16 fighter jets has been formed within the Ukrainian Air Force. It includes Ukrainian pilots along with combat-experienced veterans from the United States, America, and the Netherlands. These people, it is claimed, are already carrying out real combat missions in the Ukrainian sky.
The squadron includes American pilots with extensive combat experience in Afghanistan. One of them recently took part in operations in the Middle East, after which he joined the defense of Ukraine. On the Dutch side, pilots trained in elite European air combat schools have been brought in, specializing in modern tactics, interception, and high-tech aerial warfare. Intelligence Online clarifies that Western veterans have signed temporary contracts with 6-month rotations, with the possibility of extension. They do not hold official ranks within the Ukrainian structure.
The units were formed under conditions of maximum secrecy. The main objective is to strengthen the air defense of the Kyiv region. Almost every day, the squadrons carry out combat missions. This involves intercepting cruise missiles, Kaliber, Kasta-1, and attack drones that regularly target the city's energy infrastructure. The fighter jets operate in a night patrol format, with rapid response to any aerial threats. Ukraine has officially denied the sensational information about foreign pilots serving in the armed forces of Ukraine. The head of the communications department of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Yuri Inat, stated that all combat sorties are carried out exclusively by Ukrainian pilots. Telegram may be completely blocked in Russia as early as April 1st. Many Russian media outlets are reporting this as insider information. According to sources from Baza, several agencies report that Roskomnadzor is preparing for a complete block of Telegram. Starting April 1st, the messenger will stop working for Russians, not through mobile internet, not through Wi-Fi, not through any providers. Russians, just imagine you open Telegram and there's nothing there. No chats, no channels, no news, absolutely nothing. Only an official notification from Roskomnadzor. For your own safety. In short, a vacuum, but you're used to that. Orbán is once again harshly attacking the opposition. The Prime Minister of Hungary is accusing the Tisza party of making a secret deal with Brussels and Kyiv. It seems this is his main blow against his competitors before the elections. According to Putin's friend Viktor Orbán in Munich, opposition leader Péter Magyar has made a secret pact, which allegedly includes the following: Hungary giving up its veto rights in the European Union, supporting the Migration Pact, and accelerating Ukraine's accession to the EU. Orbán leveled these accusations at a party event while announcing the electoral list. The Hungarian Prime Minister stated that if the TISA party wins the parliamentary elections on April 12, 2026, Hungary will lose control over its borders, supposedly open up to migrants, and, in addition, find itself drawn into a conflict with Russia. Orbán once again stated that Hungary will not finance Kyiv, and certainly will not send its youth to fight in Ukraine. In turn, the opposition refutes all of Orbán's accusations. They say that the issue of Ukraine's accelerated accession to the EU should be put to a referendum. Let me remind you, earlier opposition leader Peter Mader stated that he was lured into a setup. And Viktor Orbán's government wants to use this to discredit him in the upcoming elections. According to Ada, his ex-girlfriend drew him into a compromising situation, and he denied the accusation of drug use. According to the politician, Viktor Orbán's government is using intelligence agency methods to discredit him. Journalists received a photo taken in a bedroom with the caption "soon," hinting at the imminent release of a sex video. The image quickly spread across social media, sparking active discussion. The video, for now, has not appeared online.
Many journalists received a link to video recordings from the room. I suspect that they are planning to publish recordings made with intelligence agency equipment and possibly doctored to show intimate interactions of me and my partner at that moment. Yes, I am 45 years old. I have a sex life with an adult partner, expensive underwear from Fidesz. Publish whatever you want, fabricate it if you wish. Do as you please. I am not going to back down because of blackmail and threats.
Orbán's aggressive rhetoric towards his main rival and Ukraine is quite easy to explain. This Putinist is trailing by 8 to 12 points in the polls ahead of the elections. Well, the situation is heating up. Let's see if Orbán's strategy will work. Tough times are coming to Russia, and people there are already talking about it openly. Nikolai Patrushev, one of the most influential people in Russian government, gave an interview to the propaganda newspaper Argumenty i Fakti. The presidential aide and chairman of Russia's maritime board openly predicts serious problems for the Russian merchant fleet. According to him, attacks on Russian ships and cargo by the West will become more frequent. Patrushev calls these actions piracy and accuses the West of trying to completely block Russia's access to the seas. And he warns that if Russia does not respond harshly, soon the English, French, and even the Balts will supposedly become completely brazen.
In this situation, we need to focus on creating a high-tech fleet. That is why one of the priorities we are setting in the aforementioned documents is technological leadership.
Patrushev emphasizes that any attempts at a naval blockade are illegal under international law and that Russia is ready to respond first with diplomacy and legal measures, but if that does not work, then with naval force up to and including breaking through the blockade. He even hinted that, in response, Russia might start taking an interest in what is being transported here under European flags. On February 16th, another round of trilateral negotiations between Ukraine, the US and Russia began in Geneva. This is already the third round in recent weeks. The previous ones were in Abu Dhabi, and they are continuing today, February 18th. But let's talk not so much about the negotiating table itself, but rather about the positions and statements the parties brought to this meeting. On the eve of the Geneva round, right before it began, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, addressed Ukraine with a rather tough message.
These are big negotiations. This will be very easy. Listen, Ukraine had better sit down at the negotiating table as soon as possible. On the
other hand, a softer clarification also came from Washington. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the White House is not forcing anyone to do anything, including not making Ukraine agree to an unfavorable peace deal. At the same time, Rubio lamented that Trump is being criticized and condemned precisely for his attempts to stop the war in Ukraine. Supposedly everyone wants peace, but as soon as someone actually tries to achieve it, accusations immediately begin. Well, what if by peace we mean ending the war? If it's on Russia's terms, with territorial concessions, demilitarization, and renouncing NATO, then yes, we really will condemn such a quick deal. Because for Ukraine, that's not peace, but capitulation under pressure. And in fact, about negotiations. Ukraine will not withdraw its troops from Ukrainian Donbass. At the same time, for a constructive negotiation process, it is necessary to establish a ceasefire. It was from this position that the Ukrainian delegation went to Geneva. We'll tell you in our report what should be discussed at the negotiations.
Ceasefire, security guarantees, and post-war recovery. This is what Ukraine wants from the United States in the negotiation process.
The first of these steps, according to Zelensky, is reliable security guarantees, which Trump must provide without dealing with Putin, because these must be security guarantees from the United States. The second step, according to Zelensky, is the need to allocate funds for the reconstruction of Ukraine after the end of the Russian-Ukrainian war. And the third step is a ceasefire on the Russian-Ukrainian front. According to Zelensky, Trump must put pressure on Putin so that he agrees to a ceasefire and stops the fighting.
So far, one of the key issues that has not seen any progress remains the question of territory.
At a minimum, what they want is Donbas, the Donetsk region, but in its entirety so they can present it as a victory to their own society. Maybe not even for society, because sometimes we think it's about society, but maybe it's for himself. It's a victory for him personally. I'm not sure he thinks about how to sell something to society because he can do that at any moment. He's been doing it for the past 30 years. That's exactly why we can't just withdraw troops from our territory or trade territory. One piece for another? It's something insane. That's exactly why it's not just about territories.
In fact, the issue of territory will become key during the negotiations in Geneva. In addition, during his meeting with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Zelensky also mentioned that the attacks by Russia on Ukrainian energy infrastructure would be discussed in Geneva, attacks to which, by the way, Ukraine does not leave unanswered. We
don't have many missiles. Flamingo. We used them a few days ago on the territory where the Oreshnik system is located, and we'll see the results. But I think we've already gotten results. It's very important that we work on increasing the number of these missiles.
The Kremlin also confirms that the issue of territory will be one of the key topics in Geneva. They are also announcing changes in the composition of their delegation.
Another round of negotiations on Ukrainian regulation will also take place in the trilateral Russian-American-Ukrainian format, February 17th through 18th in Geneva. This time the Russian delegation will be headed by the assistant to the President of Russia, Medinsky.
In fact, the reason given for Putin's aide, Vladimir Medinsky, known in particular for creating Russian pseudo-history and spreading propaganda narratives, heading the Russian delegation this time is that the issue of territory will be discussed in Geneva.
Again, if we talk about the personnel changes that took place ahead of the next round of negotiations in Geneva, this is no longer Abu Dhabi. There, instead of the head of the main intelligence directorate, who, by the way, as far as I understand, remained part of the Russian delegation, we now have Mr. Medinsky, who is well known to us from the negotiation process in Istanbul, which was completely deadlocked and hopeless. From a political standpoint, the negotiation process, where apart from the humanitarian track on prisoner exchanges, essentially nothing was achieved.
The Russian negotiation team will also include a hardliner on Ukraine, Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Galuzin.
And yet another very interesting person has been added to this negotiation group. That is Mr. Galuzin. He is the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, who, even before this round of negotiations in Geneva, made a rather amusing statement. He said that Russia wants to talk to Europe and America about what to introduce in Ukraine. What exactly? That's right, external governance. In other words, exactly what Putin has been talking about for a very, very long time.
And such changes in the Russian negotiation team are yet another sign that the Kremlin is merely simulating negotiations.
By the way, it's not just us saying that the Russian Federation is not approaching the negotiation process constructively and continues to imitate it. Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, spoke about this at the Munich Security Conference. He stated this directly. Moreover, in his latest statement, this was emphasized by Kaja Kallas, the chief diplomat of the European Union, who also holds the combined position of EU Security Commissioner. She also stressed that Russia is simulating the negotiation process and in reality is not interested in peace. This is evidenced by their statements and what they say in the public sphere.
Should we expect significant progress from the meeting in Geneva? The question is rhetorical because despite the fact that the negotiation process no longer looks the way it did a few years ago, the Kremlin remains firm on key issues and seeks full control. Over Ukraine.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Japan has joined the war and it is on Ukraine's side. Weapons, technology, this is what Tokyo is ready to provide to Kyiv. After all, Japan is planning to take back the Kuril Islands from Russia, which rightfully belong to it.
Today, Japan is one of Ukraine's key partners.
Our country's relationship with Japan during this war is closer than ever before, and Japan supports us on principle.
Tokyo has allocated more than $13 billion in support. The main focus has been on financial aid and humanitarian programs.
Japan serving as a steadfast and close strategic ally, and a prominent member of the broad coalition of leading Western industrial economies, which represent the most significant portion of the world's global economies, was stable and specifically acting as a key member of the influential group of 7 nations.
Something greater may appear on the horizon. Japan is considering joining the Pearl Initiative as part of a long-term support format for Ukraine.
We greatly appreciate that Japan is taking such a leadership position not only in the Pacific region, but also globally. This is significant support for our resilience, and thanks to this, for the rules-based international order as well.
In addition, Tokyo is ready to allocate funding for the supply of non-lethal defense equipment. We are talking about radar systems, surveillance equipment, body armor, and other protective gear for the military. For decades, Japan's security policy remained extremely cautious. But the situation is changing after the election victory of a female prime minister.
I have always had great love and respect for Japan, and I will say that our relationship will be stronger than ever before. I look forward to working together with you, and on behalf of our country, I want to tell you this. If you have any questions, concerns, if you need anything, any services, whatever I can do to help Japan, remember, we are ready.
The political agenda promoted by Akaichi involves lifting restrictions on the development of Japan's own armed forces, revising bans on the export and re-export of weapons, as well as a more active role for Japan in matters of collective.
Ensuring comprehensive security is vital, because the potential risks and consequences of a failure are far too significant and are simply not worth taking.
Forgetting that when Putin launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Japan once again began to vigorously assert its claim to the Kuril Islands, which the USSR seized during World War II.
They make a fuss over the Kuril Islands, which are not even a fifth of their native land, while giving away to China territories much larger than these Kuril Islands.
The aggressor state views the Kurils solely as a military political asset. For example, in 2017, the Russian Federation deployed an additional army division there, which provoked protests from Japan. Already this spring, the Japanese government is preparing to propose to Russia a detailed plan for joint economic activity on the southern Kurils.
As long as Putin remains in power, I find the conclusion of any agreements highly unlikely, because tourism, of course, is a good thing, but, as they say, Putin's Russia already has its economic partners. It's not Japan, it's China. Without China's support, Russia would not have been able to wage war for so long. It's clear that China is a geopolitical adversary of Japan. At the
same time, China continues to strengthen its strategic communications and deepen cooperation with North Korea. In Japan, they realize that in this war, thanks to Russia, North Korean soldiers are gaining experience.
More than 10,000 North Korean soldiers have been sent from Russia to the war in Ukraine. There, they are learning new ways of conducting combat, with drones, artificial intelligence, in cyberspace, and with traditional weapons. Returning to North Korea, we need to consider what they will use this for and against whom. That's why I say Ukraine is not some distant problem.
For Ukraine, assistance from Japan is important, as is the overall expansion of the circle of countries willing to participate in ensuring its defense capability. If the Takaichi strategy is implemented, Ukraine could have real military cooperation with Japan.
First and foremost, technology. We need to understand that in terms of modern technology, perhaps even Japan is living in a different century than we are. And in this sense, of course, Japan's technological assistance could be simply irreplaceable. We understand that most dual-use technologies can be perfectly well used on the battlefield as well.
The relationships and ties that Ukraine has previously built with Japan will help in the context of Japan's new historical stage of militarization and the formation of new security alliances.
Poland is preparing a bill for Russia for the Soviet period. This concerns reparations for crimes and damages resulting from Soviet domination. According to the Financial Times, Prime Minister Donald Tusk has instructed the Institute of National Remembrance to conduct a large-scale investigation into the atrocities, losses, and consequences not only of World War II, but also of all 40-plus years of the Cold War, when Poland was under strict Soviet control. The Polish Institute has already stated that this investigation will be much broader than the similar work on Nazi crimes. Let me remind you that in 2022, Poland presented Germany with a bill for 1.3 trillion euros for crimes committed during World War II. And this claim is still up in the air since Berlin responds that the issue was legally settled after the end of the war. We will continue to follow this situation, and in the meantime, write in the comments what you think. Will the claim against Russia make it to court? Thousands of soldiers from North Korea have gathered near Ukraine's borders. What is the Kremlin aiming to achieve with this, and what role is assigned to this meat ration from Kim Jong-un? Details in our report.
In his attempts to please the Russian dictator, Kim Jong-un has lost his best soldiers.
I saw my comrades die right next to me. I hid in a dugout.
The main killers of the 21st century, North Korean troops joined in October 2024. At first, it was about sending engineering brigades, but the Russian army suffered such heavy losses in the Kursk region that it became impossible to quickly make up for them with their own forces. The Ukrainian troops' August raid directly into Russian territory forced the command to change their plans. Instead of engineers, what was needed were capable infantry units.
The Russian forces are critically short of personnel to cover all sections of the front. And as soon as a critical situation arises somewhere, there is immediately, if not a collapse, then at least a drop in defensive capabilities.
The operation is developing successfully, strictly in accordance with pre-approved plans.
During this time, more than 18,000 soldiers have taken part in the war against Ukraine. According to South Korean intelligence, about 6,000 have been killed and only 1,100 have returned home. Another approximately 11,000 servicemen are holed up on Russian territory in the Kursk region, adjacent to Sumy.
North Korean soldiers are learning modern combat operations which have emerged, which are used in modern warfare. These include unmanned systems and communication systems. Others include unmanned systems, including those with artificial intelligence, and accordingly combat tactics that differ somewhat from previous wars. These are small assault groups.
At first glance, it may seem that the North Koreans are simply lying in ambush, but their presence in the Kursk region has strategic significance.
If tomorrow the KPA units are withdrawn from the Kursk region, the entire grouping will be drastically weakened, and it will not only be unable to conduct offensive operations in the Sumy region, but also to hold even the captured territories in defense.
It is a kind of buffer that allows Russian troops to hold the front line and conduct limited offensive operations.
The actions carried out by North Korean soldiers behind the front line have given Putin the opportunity to free up forces. So, the same number, those same 10,000 Russian soldiers, can be transferred from the rear, from the relatively close rear, from the second or third line, and moved to the front line to take part in combat operations. In this way, they can numerically reinforce their troops directly on the front line.
As long as the North Korean contingent operates within the framework of the agreement between Pyongyang and Moscow, the soldiers do not leave the territory of the Russian Federation.
In all likelihood, at the very least for the time being, they will not cross the border into Ukraine, but will instead provide strategic assistance to the Russian army, while remaining on Russian territory.
The official reasons are supposedly to comply with international restrictions and North Korea's unwillingness to escalate the situation with sanctions. Unofficially, the cost and conditions set by Kim Jong-un make the use of North Koreans in Ukraine economically and politically unfeasible for the Kremlin.
If North Korean troops cross the border into our country, then Kim Jong-un himself becomes a legitimate target according to international legal documents. And
don't even try to look for any good intentions. It's all banal and simple. For Kim Jong-un, sending thousands of soldiers to certain death is a way to score points and make money. And for Moscow, North Koreans are a temporary quick fix, masking the army's systemic problems.
The North Koreans have recently begun more or less active construction. They've constructed and completed several blocks somewhere in some of the more economically disadvantaged regions.
For example, in the new Hwasun district, the Sefyolan Street was opened. The North Korean dictator cynically declared that it was in honor of the soldiers killed by the Ukrainian defense forces. According to him, the site should become a source of honor for the generation of Igor Sefyanian and for the state. Thus, North Koreans on Kursk soil are a symbol that the Erefians cannot fight on their own. And for Ukraine, this is yet another proof that the enemy is weak. Powerless Bryansk joins powerless Belgorod. Let them thank Putin for that. So, what's the situation there, and which Russians will soon pay a heavy price for their aggression against Ukrainians? More on this in our report. Numerous Russian cities along the border are rapidly plunging into total darkness en masse, and it appears the rest of the country is now starting to follow suit.
The majestic mythical unicorns slowly wander directly underneath the bright glowing beam of the flashlight.
Belgorod region was one of the first to experience blackouts. Belgorod now lives in a constant state of power outages. New strikes are only making the difficult situation worse. The night of February 16th was no exception. Drones struck the local thermal power plant again. Plunging the region into a blackout.
We were filming, basically, this oak one here. There's absolutely no light at all. Everything that's making noise is from the generator. If you see something lit up in a window, it's a generator. Belgorod, that's Belgorod over there. There's absolutely no light at all over there.
The lack of electricity isn't the only problem. For Belgorod residents, heating and water have now also become a luxury. Just a week ago, a mass evacuation was announced in Belgorod. The city was on the verge of losing its heating. On top of that, the governor of Belgorod region, Gladkov, has already warned that there will be no hot water until April.
We understand that the homes in the city of Belgorod that are connected to centralized heating will not be able to receive it until the end of the heating season. Hot water.
But here, Gladkov was not entirely truthful with Belgorod residents about the water. Further on, though, outside.
Harder, harder. They even wash this away, they lift it up. So harder, harder. Now they're about to remove the dog. They're getting it ready.
On the night of February 16th, Bryansk took over the baton from Belgorod. Local authorities stated that they had shot down more than 170 drones over the Bryansk region. It seems that the energy facilities themselves were personally involved in shooting them down. After flickering a bit, the city lost power and with it, heating. Public pages reported that the strike hit the Novobryanskaya substation in Igonichi. That's less than 20 kilometers from Bryansk. Russians should thank Putin for this kind of commotion. And it's not even about Ukrainian revenge, but simply thank him for starting the war.
I'd like to set the record straight right away. There is no revenge. This is targeted, combat work, systematic.